place. No. Facebook can also be pretty remarkable to overhear and look into the wonderful work that many people do. And if you're friends with Tony Keeler, you would get to see him leading an incredible choral music education program in Jackson, Mississippi. Northwest Rankin High School, and I encourage you rather, to go to their website and just look at what they are doing with students. Tony, kudos to you and your staff, and let's hear it for music educators everywhere. So we're Facebook friends now, we've known each other a couple of years, I've watched his work, and imagine doing all of that and 52 Sundays a year.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That's crazy. A part-time church musician. So today we want to create some space to allow some of the folks among us who do more than one thing and yet still bring all of the passion and energy and excellence to Sunday by Sunday that often happens. So I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves, but I want you to welcome our panelists today, Tony Keeler and company. Let's hear from you.
So this is extremely informal. We want this to be conversational. I've kind of fielded some questions that we've kind of taken a look at. But I want us to begin that very kind introduction. Thank you. But we'll kind of give a little brief introduction of kind of who we are, what we do, because some of us may be just part-time, some of us may be juggling other things. So we'll do that, and then we'll hop into some questions and have some time at the end where this can hopefully be interactive, where we can all kind of workshop and brainstorm some things. Start with you.
Okay, I'm Kerry Huddleston. I'm serving part-time at Parkway Baptist Church in Duluth, Georgia, just north of here. So I've had various different jobs, about 5 different official jobs, music educator for several years, full-time church musician, music liaison librarian, academic librarian, but always involved somehow in church ministry, either full-time or part-time, currently part-time.
I'm Ann Hunter Idson. I'm at Caldwell Presbyterian Church in Charlotte, but I've been in the Baptist world my whole life before that. I'm part-time, and somehow, after almost 12 years in the church that I'm in, I've become the unofficial, unpaid associate minister.
Well, as Doug mentioned, I am Tony Keeler at Northwest Rankin High School, but I'm also the director of music and worship at Northside Baptist Church. That's in Clinton, Mississippi, and last Sunday was actually my 5th year serving in that capacity, so very excited about that.
I'm Cheryl Charter. I'm a retired music educator. I taught choir for 32 years, middle school and high school, and did part-time music ministry. So I lived in your world, and it's challenging, especially at the high school level. Tony, you were talking earlier, and middle school is exciting and fun, and you kind of have to be called to it, I think both of us were. But high school is a different level, and much more time is demanded of you. So it's really hard, and I pray for you. I'm currently, though, retired from that and from being a choral teacher, and I serve part-time as a music minister at Spring Creek Baptist Church in Oklahoma City.
All right, so you mentioned time, and I want to sort of begin by talking about time management. So the idea is, I'll pose a question, and you all just jump in and any comments from everybody. But I want to talk about that balance of managing time effectively. And some of us, again, are doing kind of 2 things at once. But even in a part-time position, between primary obligations, church role, when they require 2 things: significant preparation, and then of course the emotional toll that goes into doing what we do. And so anybody start, and we'll kind of just go down the line. Cheryl, what's on you? Love it.
Early on, when I first was a part-time music minister, I was teaching middle school. And so I made it work, but I would have to meet with my pastor. It was a small church. And so we set up a time where the 2 of us could just brainstorm for a couple hours. And so for me, it was like after school Sometimes it was a Wednesday afternoon. It was just kind of we worked together. But since it was just a small staff and it was mainly he and I, we made that work. And so as time went on and I changed positions in both areas, I learned to find a time for me to work just on music ministry. Because I had to be saving the same kind of time for my regular job of being a school teacher. So for me, what worked often and still does somewhat is Sunday evening, and then sometimes I'll leak over into Monday evening. But for me to have a set time where I worked on, I could really just focus on that, helped me survive mentally. And that's kind of how I managed the time. And as I said, as time went on, I got better at it, I think, just like you do anything.
So
Yeah, that helped me too, sorry. That helped me too, to have clear delineation of these are these responsibilities, these are these responsibilities, and to keep them separate. I felt that was being fair to, you know, the full-time official job I had, but then also being fair to the part-time church job. But to keep them separate, don't let them really blend in that much. But yeah, to carve out distinct separate times.
I will say that this has become really hard for me since COVID, because I worked at home, and so now I can, you know, it's all an internal thing. I have to do my own disciplinary, because I can easily say, oh, I can just do that at home, and then it just keeps going. And I am in a time of empty nest, and I love what I do, and so I do give more time to it than I don't give as much as when I work full-time, but I give more time to it. But this is great.
I really do like what you two said, that idea of finding and delineating that time. I will say this is your 5 for me in the part-time vocation, and at the beginning there's such a want to do well, and I think all of us have that. You want to be good at what you're doing, but I think for me it was tricky at the beginning to not feel bad about setting those boundaries, because again, you want that product to be a good product, but I have found being very specific about availability, and Cheryl, similarly, we're a smaller staff, and so I'm grateful that I can be very specific about the afternoons that I'm available. My high school, we have after-school rehearsals, and depending on what season we're in, they can run until 9 p.m., and that can be challenging. And so finding those days where I say, okay, here's my availability, but there's the other side of that. Even with the full-time position, when I'm working with my team, not feeling bad about saying that's a day for that's church, that's those responsibilities. And I kind of wish I would have done that earlier on. And maybe instead of doing that year 3, year 4, I wish I would have felt better about doing that earlier. But I also think as I've sort of settled and kind of let my shoulders down a bit, you find that there's such respect and value in being very specific about what you can do and what you're willing to do. So, yeah, that's still figuring that out.
I was fortunate in working the first time with a pastor who would say to me, Cheryl, now you are part-time. You need to just, well, who says that? I was fortunate. And I learned. And then as in my choral teaching, I taught with a man who, we sat down at one point and said, okay, you're living at the school, and he said, when we're doing these musical rehearsals, we can do this better. We just need to make a plan, and we don't need to be here until 10 o'clock at night. And we changed. And so I would say the same thing applies no matter where you are. If you set up and I'm just, okay, so I'm always going to plan, because, if you don't plan, you plan to fail, right? So, but planning is important time-wise to say, I'm going to do this much. And I have to preach this to me all the time, because I'm retired, and I could be, Clay used to say, you'd live at the church if we were closer, and I said, yeah, I would.
Well, one of the few courses I took in seminary, I got 2 degrees in music ed. I took some classes in seminary, the New Orleans Extension, when they had those. Anyway, well, one of them was counseling. Okay, I guess that's what was offered. But I remember the professors saying, and I can't remember his name, you know, you got your ball of string, and you got so much string, sometimes you got to take those scissors, you know, or they will take your whole ball of string. And that's really stuck with me. Okay, this person's taking my whole ball of string. And you know, you're not like, you know. On the side, you know, you are. I've seen Andy actually do. Inside you are, but you're always gracious and kind. But you know, the phrase, you know, you might be right, has saved me so many times. So just you kind of, okay, you got to know when to cut it off.
So the next thing I'd like to do, you all know where we're from, the situation. Talk a little bit about responsibilities, where you are, and I want to talk a little bit about selecting rep and worship planning, and kind of speak to creating those meaningful music experiences. And I think most of us kind of in that volunteer choir setting of varying skill levels, because again, and I will speak to that first, that can be challenging when you do have that limited time, where you're trying to delineate that time. So how do you create those meaningful experiences while being mindful of your situations and settings? Who wants to go first?
You.
Okay, I'll go first. So I will say this, I do think in my church situation, it's quite precarious because we've got a high number of music teachers in our chancel choir. Six that are current music educators, and then I believe there are 3 more that are retired music educators, which that was very intimidating at the beginning, because any of those people could have stood on that podium and probably have done a little bit better than I, but I think the thing that I have leaned into lately is really understanding that these individuals, and you spoke so beautifully about this, they are volunteers, and they're doing this, and they're showing up after those long days because they want to be there. So I try to sort of kind of do like a but then or an and if, where if I really want to go for something that's maybe a challenging, technical idea, balancing that with things that are manageable, because for me, it can be really easy to say, okay, well, we're a smaller choir on a great Sunday, we'll 30. Then there's Sunday, I'm like, well, we have a little ensemble this morning. And that's okay, but I find leaning into the fact that these individuals want to be here. I don't always have to program the hardest, the toughest, the best every Sunday. Or I remember we were in a worship planning meeting, and I said, oh, well, I don't know if we should do that anthem. We did that 2 months ago. And my senior pastor said, Tony, they don't remember that. You do. And so I think that, and I think there's a fine line, because that's a slope. You don't want that to end up being complacency, where you're just kind of phoning things in, but allowing yourself to say, hey, there's familiarity here. I've brought back anthems, and this is, I've got a few people in the choir, and they call them the Northside Bops. And that's just like a good piece, the Pope, God is our refuge, or whatever. There's those pieces where it's like, oh, they know that. But what I have found is there's so many opportunities for that artistry, and so many opportunities to take a piece that they may be familiar with and do so many things musically that maybe you didn't get to the first time through, because they are concerned about notes and rhythms. And so there's been some freedom for me to really create those moments, and also just having time for dialogue about what the text means and how can we communicate this in worship. Okay, I went first. So
Okay, well, I just thought when you posed that question, it didn't matter what choir I was trying to select music for, whether it was a middle school choir, or a high school choir, or a church choir, you still have to look at what you have. And I learned that earlier on in middle school, because, oh my word, you don't know what you're going to have until you get in, and then it changes during the year.
Yes.
So you're constantly assessing, and that's kind of how it is with church choirs. Because sometimes people come, you have your nucleus of people who are there. They're just always going to be there. But you have 1 or 2 that have to come and go for whatever reasons. Right now I have an alto, a lady who is out for like 6 months because her husband's going through chemo. and they can't be exposed to anything. And I'm like, oh, this Deborah, so much. So I'm having to rethink, what can we do? And I have a couple other missing spots. And then I was inspired yesterday by, maybe it was John, who said, where can you recruit? Where can you find people? And so I'm thinking along those lines. But again, going back to selecting music, you have to see what you have, and you have to be realistic about what they can do. But I like to nudge my church choir and like give them, a challenge. For us, that's Dan Forrest, or it's Elaine Hagenberg, or it's, Peterson. Help me.
Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle. I got to meet him last summer, and I thought, oh, he's such a young kid. But those are things that I like to do, and we all know this stuff. Look at the text, look at the musical line. But it's got to speak to. For me, it's got to speak to me. If I'm not convinced, what can I expect from a choir?
Taking this in a little different direction as far as part-time, what I found really works for the families and for me is I just do seasons of children's choirs. So, we'll do like a 6-week up to Palm Sunday, and then we don't do it, and then we'll do a 6-week up to Christmas. And somehow having those parents, they know it's going to be this amount of time, and it's really important to be there. And sadly, people get up for performances more than they do the days when I had children's choir, just for the beauty of having children's choir, and and having them sing and worship and everything good. So that has really worked well, and of course the repertoire is easier because it's these high holy days, and I can use stuff out of the hymnal or Orchestra's Guild or whatever works. And handbells at the same.
So you have the focus goal.
Right.
Yeah, it's like with any situation, you look at what you have, you work with what you have. But I always, with whatever I've got, I always try to find things that are authentic, that are true to the word, the day, that are not. I love Dr. Saylor was, the triteness. It's not trite or just so. Predictable that it's, but that has some thought to it, it's authentic. And it's also authentic for the people. Can we do this well? I'd love to do Beethoven's Mount of Olive with my 15 singers, but, it's not going to be authentic. It's a great piece of work, but it wouldn't be authentic for them. So finding things that are authentic for them that they can do with excellence. And then Mark Patterson at the Atlanta Choristers Guild in a workshop, he said, this really struck me, that I find I've done this but not verbalized it, was take out a piece of your repertoire. And you can immediately improve because you've got, I'm always pushing too much, or this is too much, and it's just too many notes. And if I remove something that's going to be, and back off a little bit, then I can really get into some more excellence. Authenticity, I can't say authenticity, and then excellence. What can they do with excellence?
So this question is kind of closely related. Expectations and the retention of musicians, and I think especially in a post-COVID world, so many situations look different. What are some things that are working well, and then what are some challenges? Should I go first? So I will say this, and this is, I don't think it is the case with lots of folks, but post-COVID, our church membership has seen a flourishing, and a lot of the individuals that have joined the church, the choir, the chancel choir has kind of been that gateway. And one of the things, kind of in talking with my senior pastor, about, doing this panel and just kind of asking some questions, she made a statement that I thought was profound. And she said that the music ministry has been the most sustainable gateway that has led to individuals engaging in other areas of leadership within the church, serving in the diaconate, working through the Sunday school program. And so I know that's not, that may not be everyone's situation, but it's interesting to see that. But I think the key and the piece there has been that I have really tried to cultivate a culture where that time that we get to spend together on Wednesday, and it's an hour, but where we're going to do some things that are challenging, but where we take the time to just share care and concern with each other. And I remember at first I thought, okay, well, this could go the wrong way. We could be doing this for 30 minutes or so. But what I find is that time really unifies us, and it really grounds us and connects us. And we are fortunate we have a few scholarship seniors, and the way that those individuals care so well for those folks, I think that is wonderful. But there already have been so many great ideas and suggestions, and I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. But what I will say, the concept of seasons, where we have individuals that sing super well, but they may have other obligations. Hey, Easter, we're doing the Hallelujah chorus. We invite individuals up. They don't have to have sung it. They don't even have to be at the rehearsal. We've got octavos on each side of the chancel. At this time, come up. We had 5 people come to the loft for that at Christmas. And so doing things like that, where there's a minimal commitment, or, hey, everybody, we're doing the majesty and glory of your name. If you know that, come to the choir room at 9:30 on Sunday. I think those are things that really can get people connected that may not be able to have that weekly obligation at that time.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm going to try that this week, this year. We're doing a temporary service, and so I'm putting the word out. If you want to just come and learn this work and do this with us, just come and commit this much time. And I have, a couple of people that are signed up to do that, and maybe they'll stick. It's like my pastor is a musician, and so I've been at this church 4 years. I moved in a pandemic. In the middle of the pandemic, I went to a new church. That's crazy. Because you have masks on, and then you go virtual, and so it's like, who are the people? So that's been an interesting thing. But he started singing in my choir, my pastor. And as he would say, and I'm still there. I never got to leave. I said, no, and you're not going to. But yeah, I like that idea of seasonal, and so I'm going to try that. And our children's choir kind of operates, and it's sad because I know this church had a great choir program at one time. And then circumstances and then the pandemic on top of it just kind of pushed it all away. So, yep, seasonal,
Yes.
that's a good option.
As far as children's choirs, I'm trying to do, we've lost there were several young families that were, the pandemic really just kind of sped the trend up, I think, everywhere. But I'm trying to do like no prep, low prep things children could do to lead in worship. We've got these great old for instruments, and so we do a hymn that's pentatonic, and okay, do this rhythm on one of those notes, or they help lead the call to worship or do motions with it, just to somehow involve them. But yeah, I thought I was great as far as recruiting and encouraging people, making it fun, assuming the best, because they put the S on and sustain it for 3 beats at the end of, heavenly keys. Oh, God. Have I ever asked you to sing this?
You need to put that on the wall of your
But always assume the best. They're there for volunteers. They're not being malicious when they do. And you kind of gracious. Wow, that was a lot of yes. Okay. So, and Tom's, I made a commitment to tell them somehow I love them. Whatever is appropriate.
An interesting thing about COVID is we went ahead and met on Zoom every Wednesday night. And we we were just checked in with each other and told stories, and we played music trivia and named that tune, and and that just really, really put deep roots into our community. And so that was there. And then we had a few people that, and also we lost 3 very dear choir members, not to COVID, but during COVID, when we couldn't gather and really more. So we really acknowledge that. But then people that joined after that, I think it was just easier for them to get into that community because it's just part of the DNA. And we certainly do a time at the end of choir where we name issues and concerns and pray together. And those are just small things that really make a difference.
And I'm going to add, week by week with me, sometimes it's just kind of working to get to the next thing. But what I find is that time on Wednesday, that kind of separation from like the day job, if that makes sense, is so life-giving. Mm-hmm. It can be so life-giving. So it's a lot, but I just find there are times when I go in and I feel like I'm more spiritually fed. It's the other way around, and that's been really, really wonderful. I want to talk a little bit about resources, because in situations where there may be part-time, you kind of see a trend or a correlation between some limited resources. And so I'm just wondering if there are things, especially post-COVID, I know there are several churches in my area that have sort of seen even a financial dip, or have been, kind of went up during COVID and down. So what are some things, and I could start, the best thing that I've done as far as resources, and then sharing, I know a lot of people do that, but before I even purchase something now, I'm in the practice, there are a few places around where before I buy anything, hey, have you done this before? And that's so helpful. And then the other thing is just digging into our church library and kind of finding some of those gems that, I've got people in my chancel choir that have been there for as long as I've been alive, and so I pull something out, and it's like, we sang this in '85. I'm like, great, I wasn't even here, but there it is. And I just find again, I say that as like, that's a good thing, I'm sorry, but I say that, for me, I want to kind of be, budget conscious, but again, there's that emotional connection where that's tied to something that's special, or maybe I picked an anthem and I didn't realize that, well, this was when, this building was dedicated, or there's something there, and so that's been neat. And resource-wise, getting feedback from the choir. I do a survey every now and then, I say, what do you all want to sing? It helps me, because sometimes I'm looking at lectionary and I'm like, what are we going to do? And there are just times where it's like, hey, what do y'all like? And just a little Google form is really helpful, so.
That's great, yeah. Well, last summer I decided to go explore my music library that I didn't know. I just knew when I went, they had built on a wing, and it was, my office was part of that, and the whole office complex, and they moved the library and just put it in there. And I just had to, move in, and I didn't really have time to look at it or I didn't take time, and then I did last summer, and I just started going through, and I purged. There were some things that needed to go, and it's not that, some of it was, in my opinion, less than, and then there were things that I just thought, this might have been the case 40 years ago, and the choir could do this when there's like 80 copies. I'm like, what? There was a choir that could hit. Anyway, I went through that, and I donated some of that music to a man who's the choir teacher in my hometown now, and he was great to take that and said, yes, please. And so calling that made me look at the music, and so I have utilized some things in my library that I didn't really know I wasn't familiar with. So that was helpful, to do, just to go through the library for me. Because who isn't budget conscious right now? I mean, probably all of us.
And I'm in a fortunate situation. I know it's rare. It's really, we really spend all the budget. I purchase what I need, and I've been going through our library, and it's like, wow, they did that in the 80s.
glory to God is what we use, and it's just unreal. How many great songs are there? So I use that. I also use, like we do processionals every week. There's an organization called Music That Makes Community, and they have an A to Z list of songs that are short. They're paperless. They're meant to make community. It's not, your head is not in music. But, you know, a lot of rounds and things like that. But I can find a lot of stuff there too. And it's all free.
You mentioned that. Are any of y'all familiar with St. James Music?
Yes.
That is just we have a subscription, and what I love is you can even go through and sort it. You just need something quick, sort it by easy. And especially if you have a kid organist, or there's some things that kind of feel big, but the learn time can be quick. So when you said that, that reminded me of St. James.
Tony, is that an online resource?
It is, and with the subscription, you
What's
can.
it called again?
St. James Music Press. So it is a subscription. I'm not sure. I really think it may be $150 a year. I don't quote me there. But what I love is that you've got access. You can most all of them have an MP3 recording that you can listen to, and you can distribute as many copies as you need. And for instance, if there's a version of something, there is an SA version of it or an SAB version, and so you've got a lot of options. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had not thought about that.
I would say there's also a lot of organ music, like on all grade levels, handbell music, primarily like easier handbell music. If you've got a 3-octave choir, it's great.
It's even got it organized by season.
Instrumental.
Yes. So
You can search by a lot of different ways and find things through, depending on why you're looking for a piece, what you're looking for.
I mean, you could plan an entire year just using that resource. And so if you think about the investment, $150, it is. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So kind of wrapping things up, we've talked about resources, we've talked about expectations, but how does all of that work with self-care and avoiding burnout? And what boundaries or practices are you all including or trying to implement to help with that and finding that balance? I will not be going first. I'm still learning.
So, as far as self-care, my wife hates it when I say this, but I would do this for free. Yeah, I would never tell my church that. But to me, that's, Carrie was talking about yesterday being on a little mountaintop and having a musical experience that really changed his life. And I've had some of those, all-state choir. And wow, my voice is very small, but if I join with all these other people, and it was a really profound moment for me. And so I really feel called by God, and that can be tried, but I really feel, as William Self, except for the damn call of God. So it's a quote. I would do this. It nourishes my soul just to do it and to be with these people. And one thing I think that helps me retain people is to occasionally remember to stop and say, okay, this is the meaning of what we're doing. We're doing a little something more profound than, hey, look me over, let me in. I mean, this has real resonance in life. And, we're vibrating ourselves, and we join with others, vibrate. And you can get pretty metaphysical, but to remember to point out those things. The key phrase of this piece is, God is our Savior. God is our anyway. And those times resonate with me. So for me, it's really helps me when I do this, and I would do it. I need to be careful not to do it too long, because that's a real. I've told some people to tell me, because my father's a minister. He stayed too long. He needed to move on. I don't want to be one of those people. But I'll be involved somehow, either singing or, so for me, it is something.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I'm fortunate to work in a church that really cares about what we do and what we're about, and so that feeds me. I just think in the times that we're in, music is just so incredibly important. But the hardest thing for me is all the freaking ways people can get in contact with me. So I try to, on the days that I don't work, I really try to just let all those messages go. It's hard. And I can respond later, but that is a practice. It's a spiritual practice.
Well, thank you for that spiritual reminder. I find that breaks are healthy for me. Breaks are also healthy for the choir. And that sounds odd, but if we have a long swath after Lent or after Advent in Christmas time, we'll have a Sunday where we may program where it's instrumental meditations, and the choir, they're off, and they get to sit with their families. And the first time that I did that, people thought it was odd, but they kind of look forward to that, and it sort of allows you to re-amp up and say like, hey everybody, we're preparing for Lent, or we do kind of a summer choir that's smaller. And then in August we begin, hey, we're having our choir kickoff for this semester where we welcome our choral scholars back. So sort of, I know this sounds crazy, but sort of making a big deal about a Sunday that may not be a big deal, I find it's healthy and it drums up some things, but kind of going back to what we said, I find, especially part-time doing, main job in this, asking for help is so okay, and that I'm so type A, I know you can't tell. But asking for help has been sort of my lifeline the past few months, because I've come to realize that's not weakness. That doesn't show an ability to do things. What I've learned is it gives people buy-in, and it allows individuals to be stakeholders. I have part-time, I have a choir member. She texts me every Wednesday around noon, what can I pull for you? What do you need? Or I have someone else, are there any things? And at first I thought, oh, well, if they do that, then I'm not doing my job. No, they take such ownership of that. And so I find that is very helpful for me.
I'm glad that you have learned that as a young adult, because I think for me that can come late, because you don't want to put somebody out. You don't want to,
Yeah.
Well, self-care for me I think has always been a challenge, because I want to do for others. It's just my nature. And so there's times though that they need to let other people help. And I liked what you said about the buy-in, because that's important. If there's an investment there, then there's a commitment. And yes, choir for me and church ministry, well, I have to say the ministry part of this has come to play into my life more in the last 10, 15 years. And I think that's God's doing. I do. And I am trying to embrace that. And so I read something recently that said that you can help your cognitive stay mentally alert, I guess, if you read fiction. And I thought, oh, I don't do that. I just don't. I always am wanting to read something deeper. And so I'm reading Richard Rohr. I mean, paragraph by paragraph, what did he say? No, I laugh because, so this is spiritual care, or self-care for me, that kind of reading and a Benedictine nun. So I've got a Franciscan priest and a Benedictine nun that are feeding me right now. Joan Chittister. You've got to check her out. She is amazing. She's amazing. So that's how I self-care for myself. And the choir. I just have to say this, okay? So I tell my choir on Wednesday night that we get to worship twice. Because we get to worship them. Because I feel like that's a worship time. And then we get to do it on Sunday morning, and they get to help lead it.
Well, that's the frustrating thing about music is it happens in time. So, you can have that moment on Wednesday night The sad thing is that you may not get anywhere close to that on Sunday morning, or you may. But yeah, we get to worship much more.
Well,
And stuff like this really helps me. So, and I'm going to Pam, one of the music weeks this year, just because this has been, these type of things has been so good. You were my people, so it's good to know others exist.
Well, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Questions, just anything?
Mostly to those who are educators and church musicians. I don't know how you must have one half of the brain thinking, I've got these people every day for an hour or whatever it is, and then condensing that to once a week with a bunch of volunteers who are not living together at school and that sort of thing. What is your mindset between teaching students that you see every day and encountering and leading volunteers of all ages and preparing them? Sunday comes every week. What is your adjustment, or how do you do that?
I don't know if it's necessarily an adjustment. I think because the format is so different, I think the approach, there are different expectations. The outcomes are very similar, but I think the expectation with the students that I see every day and the expectation of the volunteers, I think they're different. And so I think my approach sort of bends to those situations. So I don't know if it's necessarily a separation. It's more of I'm going to approach this in a different way. And I think those approaches sort of allow you to yield those outcomes, like you said, the singing episode.
I'm laughing because I finished my choir teaching career at middle school level, which is a lot of energy. And when you're older, it's really hard. But I would come to choir rehearsal, and I would laugh and I'd go, no, I feel like I'm still at school.
There's not a lot of difference between a middle schooler and a volunteer choir member. Very simple.
That's right.
I have a question about hourly, or how are you guys paid? From a managerial standpoint, I'm just curious. Time doesn't always, so I'm just curious.
Salaried as well.
So you're choosing, I'll see y'all Wednesday and Sunday, or it's a day of the week, and you just get it done. I struggle. I've been told we have to manage through hourly. I have several part times, but that becomes cumbersome. And we talked a bit about creativity, and one of the things I struggle with, I don't know about you guys, but be creative now. Especially as you have your stress of family life and everything else. Having those artistry moments right before dinner, right now, something or whatever. It's nuts. And with hourly pay, I don't know if anybody else has that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So to follow up on that, is there an expectation at your churches as to how many hours you are supposed to put in? Your salary, but have they sort of given you a parameter? Okay, what are those?
Mine's 22
Okay.
hours. But I will say that, and I guess my pastor support says, if I'm doing a whole lot of extra one week, I'll do less than this.
I don't have a specific hour. I have the days of obligation, which are the Wednesdays and Sundays, but I do not have a specific this many hours.
Yeah, mine's the same way. Get the job done. They don't care how many hours you spend.
I think kind of to hold all these things together administratively at church, the personnel finance want to have an hour. We want you to say you're going to give 15 hours and say we're going to get that in. And then on the side, they wink, wink, nod, nod. You get your job done and it'd be awesome and it'll all be okay. And so that's kind of what I deal with in my world, both at school and at church, trying to figure out what does that work out to be for me and my family and my artistic side.
Well, I think we are right at, it's 12:01, so I think I think we're done. Thanks for the
Most of all, wanted to showcase and highlight not only these folks, but all the folks in our midst who in different ways may be part-time church music while they do other things, or maybe many other things, and often do it without a lot of acknowledgement or affirmation. And so just wanted to showcase these folks and thank all of you who offer your gifts in so many ways in roles that are not maybe 40 to 60 hours a week, you know, and yet obviously committed, competent, quality, we could just go on and on. So thank you, and kudos to you all.